In the 10 years it was active, the Dead Rising franchise saw the release of many different things. Whether that be sequels, movies, or mobile games, they had a lot, man. But also in that time there were a lot of ideas and additions to the franchise that got scrapped before completion, or just end up vanishing completely one day. So since it's already been a while since my last Dead Rising video, I thought it would be fun for me to talk about some of the things that we never got to see, or even some of the things we sadly lost over the years. And the one I want to start with is one of Dead Rising's only forms of lost media that I'm aware of, a mysterious short-lived mobile game called Dead Rising Survivor. I originally got the idea for this video after I got this comment in reference to Dead Rising's other mobile game from San Andreas X, who said, "I wonder why it got taken down besides it sucks." And I've always kinda wondered this too. All I can find online is that it was shut down in late 2013, but if I had to guess, it probably just didn't have a very large player base, and ultimately Capcom didn't feel like it was worth trying to optimize this for new devices, hence why it won't function on current iOS devices. But what I did manage to find while looking for an answer was a Reddit thread discussing a completely separate Dead Rising mobile game called Dead Rising Survivors. By the way, I'll be getting my information about this game from the dedicated wiki on the topic, and I'll try to keep my summary brief to avoid paraphrasing the whole thing, so I definitely suggest you just click the link below and go read it for yourself if you want all the details. It's very interesting and informative, and the creators did a great job of compiling all the information that they could in a very easy to understand and digest way. Dead Rising Survivor is a game that had a very short lifespan, only ranging from late 2012 to early 2013 before being taken down completely. It was released by a small mobile studio called Gree that seems to have been inactive for quite some time now. This game was released amongst 5 other mobile Capcom titles, was free to download but included microtransactions, and functioned more as a turn-based card collector rather than a proper Dead Rising game. You would start a camp of survivors and go on supply runs in order to create a large, flourishing community. You slowly collect supplies and crafting equipment in order to upgrade your base and get new weapons. You'd also have to maintain the health and well-being of your camp members, getting them food and medicine and occasionally Zombrex in case they get infected. Despite featuring a lot of Dead Rising 2's combo weapons, they apparently had some of their own. You could hire a number of different mercenaries to help you in combat, and judging by this list on Wikipedia and the few different photos we have to go off, it looks like there was quite a bit of variety to the survivors that you could meet. And aside from friendly teammates, they also had a shit ton of enemy survivors too. Some crazy granny, a surgeon, another goddamn clown. While I don't personally think this mobile game would have been for me, I do like some of the character designs and the ideas they have. I think some of these would have been very fitting in an actual Dead Rising game. The game's map would have also been quite large, featuring a number of different locations like a mall, a military base, a train station, fun stuff like that. Each location would have been decently sized and full of small areas to explore and loot and collect. And all this kind of sounds familiar to all those mobile zombie games we saw at the time and still sometimes do today. One of those games that could have probably been called anything, but they went with Dead Rising because they assumed it would help with sales. This game was also only publicly available for the short blink of an eye. If its lifespan was longer than a couple months, then we would probably have some more footage to go off or something like that. And this is also like the last legitimately missing piece of Dead Rising lost media, since the behind the scenes mocap footage was found a few years back, and before that the TGS 2005 beta build was also being searched for quite heavily, as it's one of, if not the first times the game was ever showcased to the public, and it looked similar enough to the final game but also different enough to catch people's attention. The actual copy of the game is still missing, but a lot of hand recorded footage has surfaced over the years. I highly recommend checking out Stipo's video on it from a few years back. I'd also just recommend checking out his channel in general if you like Dead Rising and somehow aren't already subscribed. But going back to Dead Rising Survival, I might make a follow-up video someday if we ever find out more or the game somehow manages to get archived. But once again, I recommend that you check out the wiki about it. For now, I just wanted to take a quick look at the often forgotten piece of Dead Rising history, as I think it's pretty interesting that an entire spin-off mobile game to one of the most popular zombie franchises could just up and disappear like this. Hopefully we'll uncover this lost gem one day, but for now, it shall remain one of the biggest pieces of Dead Rising lost media. Dead Rising 5. Over a year ago now, official beta footage of an unreleased Dead Rising game was leaked to the public. I briefly mentioned it in my Dead Rising 5 pitch video, but I didn't go into very much detail on what the gameplay entailed. We have very little information on what this build was supposed to be, but we have enough details to give us a basic idea. This game wasn't necessarily going to be Dead Rising 5, it was actually more of a prequel to Dead Rising 2, apparently. Could be wrong. Hell, it wasn't even called Dead Rising 5. Maybe this was just a temporary name, but I don't know. It looks like you'll be playing as a slightly younger and less experienced Chuck Green as he faces his first proper apocalypse. We only ever heard mention of the events that led up to Dead Rising 2, but maybe this game would have filled in a lot of those blanks and let us experience Chuck's origin story for ourselves. I think that's a pretty cool idea and leaves a lot of potential to take the franchise back to its roots after the 4th game. But how does the actual gameplay look? Well, it's still clearly very early and this video doesn't even show half of what they were planning, I'm sure. But of course that's not going to stop Reddit from complaining. One thing we gotta remember about this build is that it's very, very early. Like, this was essentially all they got done before the game was cancelled. So to judge this graphically is kinda unfair. Most of the gameplay takes place on this random island which appears to have some kind of resort on it. It's pretty unclear whether or not this would have been the final game's map or if it was essentially just a playground to test out the mechanics. But if this was the final map, we only see very small glimpses of it. So I think it's a little unfair that people completely write off the setting. I definitely agree that a large island with a resort is essentially just Dead Island, but then again, we never got to see it, so I just don't know if it's really fair to say if it would have been good or not. But the most important aspect here is the gameplay, and while we don't see much of it, what we do is super choppy and accompanied by Big Shaq for some reason. But from the looks of it, it looks like this game was basing its gameplay off the 4th entry, which I have mixed feelings about. Cause like a lot of y'all, I fucking hate that game, and its boring ass gameplay. I'd like to assume they were just using it as a basis while they developed this new game, and hopefully they would have improved or completely overhauled it, but we'll never really know. But what about the combat? That's the most important part. Well, it looks interesting to say the least. It looks like they wanted to incorporate Souls-like combat where you lock onto your enemies and are able to dodge their attacks. I don't really like this at all. I've always found the simplistic and intense gameplay of the franchise to be one of its main selling points. Very few games make killing zombies feel as good as this, and to take a slower, more stat-based approach to combat would just simply be a downgrade in my opinion. They even have fucking health bars. Get that shit out of here. Yet another reason why this game feels more like Dead Island than it does Dead Rising. The zombies themselves seem to function similarly to the ones in the 4th game, unfortunately. Except, dare I say it, these beta zombies look like they have more varied movements than the finished 4th game ones. We aren't really shown that much combat against them though, but we're shown the Grim Reaper? They seem to have a lot of weird Dark Souls looking ass enemies here, like this thing? I don't even know what this is. The special effects in Dead Rising 3 were fine. Nothing special, but also nothing to sneeze at. The ones in 4, though, they fucking sucked. And it seems like this one would have doubled down on that, unfortunately. We're also briefly shown human combat, which looks about the same as the 4th game, unfortunately. But it does look like we would have seen the return of Psychopaths, or just a more glorified version of the Maniacs. But regardless, boss fights would have made a return, and this one doesn't look too bad. You go up against a scary huge mob boss with a fucking robotic arm, which is pretty silly, but also pretty fucking cool. And it looks like we would have even saw the return of cool psychopath deaths, or sorta. This one's kinda just whatever, but it's the thought that counts. And besides him, it looks like we'd have seen a return of non-hostile survivors like these cowboys or this professor who actually has some dialogue where he rats out the mobster guy. They also show these weapon stashes where you can collect and store things across the map. Apparently this was a suggested alternative to just being able to pick up weapons wherever, and I think that's kind of fucking stupid. One of the main selling points of the original trilogy is being able to use just about anything as a weapon. Removing that just takes away from the charm, and it's also kind of fucking lazy. Considering this game would have probably came out in like 2018, 2019 on like PlayStation 4 and shit, you wouldn't really get to use the excuse that software limitations doesn't allow you to scatter the weapons all around the map, because you did it in 2006. We aren't even shown that many of the weapons that will be available. Chuck just uses a sledgehammer for most of the runtime, but we do briefly see gun combat like an assault rifle or this mounted gun, which is pretty cool. This video also briefly shows off more level design details such as climbable buildings and zip lines, which is actually pretty neat. This map clearly isn't finished, but right away this resort is looking kind of nice, man. Feels like it would be at home in the Dead Rising franchise, kind of a return to form. And it would have been so fun to explore this place. We also get a glimpse of what looks like an entire town that we would have been able to explore, and despite how early it still looks, it looks like it has way more personality than Willamette did in the 4th game. And all this is clearly very early and obviously doesn't reflect what the finished game would have been, but if they continue forward with a lot of these choices, then it would have been pretty disappointing like its predecessor, I think. A lot of these choices make the game feel generic and strips away the Dead Rising charm, but it still sucks that we never got to see the finished project and could judge it fairly for ourselves. It also really sucks that this is likely the last time we'll ever see anything new from this franchise. All we have now is that original trilogy. And you too, of course, baby.